Good evening from Washington. I'm Larry O'Connor, and if you're a frequent viewer of this program, you know that the issue of transgender policy in our public square, through our government and through our popular culture, is one that matters pretty deeply to us, especially when it pertains to our children and parents' involvement in our children's lives. We are trying to be solution-oriented here on this program whenever we can, and we're trying to see how this story ends. What's the end game? How do we resolve something that seems so unresolvable? What's the light at the end of the tunnel? Now, I've said in the past that I think one of the major things that will reverse the trend on transgender policy for prepubescent children is lawsuits. These children who are now detransitioning, who had been put on this path of chemical alteration and surgical alteration without their real informed consent, they've got to sue. And we're seeing that. Brave young women like Chloe Cole and Prisha Mosley, who you've seen on this program, they are now suing the institutions. They're suing the hospitals, the doctors, the guidance counselors, the schools, the pharmaceutical companies who have actually done this to these children without proper permission, without proper consent. That's important, but it's not enough. What else needs to be done here? What else will be a major game changer in finally changing the way we perceive this issue for our children? Well, I want to give great kudos to an Irish journalist named Helen Joyce. Helen Joyce is currently the director of advocacy for a campaign group called Sex Matters. You see, Helen Joyce is a feminist, a real traditional feminist who is trying to protect women, the definition of women, the presence of women, the safe places for women like women's prisons and women's locker rooms and women's restrooms. She's actually advocating on behalf of women in the public square and pushing back against transgender advocacy. And by the way, she's also trying to protect little girls because, as we've mentioned in the past, the vast majority of pre-adolescent children who are targeted with this ideology and activism and these medical procedures are little girls. So watch this very important moment where Helen Joyce recently in an interview revealed the last remaining obstacle to finally gaining momentum for those of us who believe that the ideology is incredibly destructive for children. Watch.
There's a lot of people who can't move on this, because that's the people who've transitioned their own children. So those people are going to be like, you know, the Japanese soldiers who were on Pacific Islands and didn't know the war was over.
Right.
They've got to fight forever. This is another reason why this is the worst social contagion that we'll ever have experienced. A lot of people have done the worst thing that you could do, which is to harm their children irrevocably because of it. Those people will have to believe that they did the right thing for the rest of their lives, for their own sanity and for their own self-respect. So they'll still be fighting. And each one of those people destroys entire organisations and entire friendship groups. Like, I've lost count of the number of times that somebody has said to me of a specific organisation that has got turned upside down on this, oh, the deputy director has a trans child, or, you know, oh, the journalist on that paper who does special investigations has a trans child, or whatever. The entire organisation gets paralysed by that one person, and it may not even be widely known at the organisation that they have a trans child, but it will come out. Like, people will have sort of said it quietly, and now you can't talk truth in front of that person, and you know you can't. Because what you're saying is, you as a parent have done a truly, like, human rights abuse level of awful thing to your child that cannot be fixed. There are specific individuals who are really actively against women's rights here, and it's not known why they are, but I happen to know through the back channels that it's because they've trans their child. And so those people will do anything for the entire rest of their lives to destroy me and people like me, because people like me are a standing reproach to them. I don't want to be. I'm not talking directly to them. I don't spend my time bitching about them. But the fact is that just simply by saying we will never accept NATO males in women's spaces, well, it's their son that we're talking about. And they've told their son that he can get himself sterilised and destroy his sexual function, and women will accept him as a woman. And if we don't, there's no way back for them and their child. They've sold their child a bill of goods that they can't deliver on. And I'm the one who has to be bullied to try to force me to deliver on it. So those people are going to be the people who will keep this bloody movement going, I'm sorry to say, because they've everything to lose. And it's a fight to the death as far as they're concerned.
Incredibly powerful, incredibly important, because it's incredibly truthful. think about it for a moment. Extend some grace and compassion, if you could, to the parents of these little girls or little boys, mostly little girls, who have been told by guidance counselors, by principals, by pediatric psychologists, by pediatricians and their medical professionals that they've consulted about this issue, who have been told that if you don't block your 12-year-old girl's puberty, if you don't use pharmaceuticals that will end up sterilizing her, if you don't end up moving toward medical transition of your daughter's biological sex, thus rendering her incapable of enjoying sex or procreating for the rest of her life, if you don't do that, your child will kill herself. What do you do as a mother and father? What do you do as a parent when you're told that by all the professionals and by the pop culture and by your government, by your president? What do you do? So even against your better judgment in some cases, you acquiesce and you say, okay, all right. The last thing I want to do is harm my own child. The last thing I want to do is be my own daughter's aggressive, hateful bully. I'm not going to be bigoted toward my own child. I will trust the professionals. I will trust the school system. I will trust the government. I will trust the President of the United States. So you go ahead and do it. And you allow your daughter to be forever modified in such a barbaric way. And then your daughter changes her mind. What do you do? How do you react? What do you say? You have to confront the reality that you have done this horrible thing to your own child. A thing that every parent would be horrified to hear happen to their kid if somebody else did it, and then you did it purposely. Of course, these people deserve grace and understanding and compassion and, if I may say, an open door. Because I mentioned Chloe Cole, I mentioned Prisha Mosley, I mentioned the courage of these young girls who, when they finally became adults, said, this was wrong. I am unhappy. I am, in fact, even unhappier than I was before I transitioned. I was guaranteed that this was going to fix all my problems. I was told that this would fix my depression. I was told that this would put me on a path to be happy, and I'm actually more unhappy than I've ever been. When those young women had the courage to step up, speak out, and say, this was wrong, and I'm going to do whatever I can to stop this from happening to other girls, they become heroes in our book. We've embraced them, we've elevated them, we've raised them up. It's fantastic. Now it's time for you, Mom and Dad. It's time for you to have the same courage that these children have. It's time for the courageous parents of transgender children to actually listen to their conscience, step up and say, this was wrong, and I did something terrible to my own child, and I will live with that for the rest of my life. But the only thing I can do to fix it is to repent and ensure that this ends now. So the door is open. The red carpet is rolled out. We're ready to hear from you. We know you're going to step up and do the right thing. And when you do, we can finally turn the corner on this dark time in our history. There's more to come on O'Connor Tonight. By now, I'm sure you've heard of the film Sound of Freedom. This is a true life action adventure about a former federal agent who turns into basically an international vigilante of sorts, saving children from the despicable plague of human trafficking. In just 2 weeks, it has amassed almost $100 million in box office receipts. It's the little movie that could, partly because of the topic, partly because of the way the mainstream media in Hollywood has reacted to this movie, but mostly because of the incredible passion of its lead star, actor James Caviezel. I ran into Mr. Caviezel on the red carpet premiere here in Washington, D.C. of Sound of Freedom. I want to share with you that interview. This is a little unorthodox because at the beginning part of the interview, we lose our video feed, but bear with us. This is a very important conversation with actor Jim Caviezel. I'd love for you to tell me a little bit about the content in this film in terms of whether this was a hard movie to make, topic-wise, and in terms of pressure from studios and other outside influences.
Well, they went to a lot of actors before they came to me because the actors didn't want to make this film.
Really?
It's too hot of a topic, too controversial. But I was used to those controversial movies.
That's fair.
But this is the best film I've done since The Passion.
Wow.
And this guy, Alejandro Monteverde, is one of the best filmmakers I've ever worked with. We had a hard time. The money fell apart. We barely kept it going. We were obviously under duress. We had cartel. We shot in the cartel areas, very dangerous areas, and then at the same time, they were rescuing children while we were down there.
Yeah.
Tim Ballard actually pulled 200 kids to safety while we were down there. So
I gotta ask though, I mean, I'm naive. Why is this even controversial? This is protecting children who are being abused in the most horrific ways. Why wouldn't people sort of all be on the side of telling that story?
That's a great question. I think a lot of the public doesn't know, but $152 billion a year business. Now, explain that to you. That means every sports team in the world, okay, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, all that hockey, and all the hockey, football. That's another major sport, right? All that together still does not equate to $152 billion. You'd also have to send every 18-year-old to Stanford University for 4 years. Now you're talking $152 billion.
Wow.
Now, over 300 kids a year under the ages of 18 are lured into the sex trade. 300. 2 million children a year are trafficked. Okay? That doesn't even include the 2 million that are organ harvested. And this goes on and on and on. So it's a major business. Past the illegal arms trade, and I believe now it is past the drug trade. So.
The fact that the premiere here is here in Washington, D.C., lawmakers, people who can make a difference, they should be paying attention to this. What should they know about this? What should they be doing?
I think you have to look at their handlers. Who is above them and why they don't. But you know where it's going to... When a politician puts his finger in his mouth, he's going to measure where the wind's coming from. He's looking at his people. Who is going to push this? And it's got to come from the people.
You mean the money behind? But when you say the people who are calling their shots, do you mean the voters and the people, or do you mean the big money in this town?
No, I'm talking about the people.
Yeah.
It's by the people for the people, right?
Should be.
Well, it should be.
Yeah.
Look, we're a republic for one reason. We have inalienable rights, right? That's why we're not a democratic. But you hear that all the time.
Right.
We're a democracy, democracy, democracy.
Yeah.
Germany had a democracy. Let's kill all children that have Down syndrome. Let's vote on that. It's costing us too much and it's merciful.
Yeah.
Sounds very similar to what's going on in the first, second, third term. Partial birth abortion. Now we can kill a baby 27 days after it's born. And then we have all these laws that they keep trying to pass that have something to do with pedophilia, making it easy for pedophiles.
Right.
Why?
So when you mentioned The Passion, which must have obviously an incredibly grueling experience for you, but not to be trite, you knew how it ended. You knew there was a happy ending at the end of Passion because you know the good news in the gospel. This movie had to be so much more draining in its own way because it's still unknown what's going to happen here with these children. It's still going on every day.
It's a different hard. Passion will always be the hardest because I was electrocuted and I had 2 open heart surgery. It was that one took me right to the end.
Yeah.
Look, none of these are easy to make, but I'm sure after Jimmy Stewart did 26 missions over Germany, wasn't easy to make It's a Wonderful Life, especially when sitting in the bar and he says, God, if you're out there, please help me. Well, when you go to this film, your heart gets on fire. Have you seen it?
Yeah, no, I'm about to. But I've read about it and I've seen the trailer.
I got 2 Academy Award winning directors, both saw this, and they're hard.
Yeah.
And they watch this and
What do you think of the model that Angel Studios has set up here, where projects like this can be made, where it has trouble in other avenues? Is this the future for film in this country?
It's going to have to be, because you're not going to get films like this made in my industry anymore. They have to have an L, a G, a B, a T, a Q, or a plus, plus, plus behind it. Yeah. And that's not art. And I agree with Richard Dreyfuss on that. You can't make Ben-Hur anymore. Okay? You understand that?
No, I know.
And what it does is, I'm for free speech.
Yeah.
We have to have that, and on the Constitution, right, search and seizure, Fourth Amendment, the Patriot Act, and all this stuff. This is illegal. What's going on? Our Constitution, the people have to wake up to that. I mean, you can kill a baby like that. When's life created? When the zygote fertilizes the egg. Okay, so. But now killing in 27 days after they're born, this is a law they want to pass in California.
Right, in California, after birth, yeah.
So, when they ask me, grooming your children, or how does these kids get taken and all that, well, there you go.
Read the headlines, yeah.
But the media has a big responsibility to expose the light on it. And I try to do what I can. You have a weapon. I have a weapon to be able to go and act. I can sit down with filmmakers and sit down and get to the heart of heart and then go into these agents and really look at what you have to look at. I don't want to tell you, I couldn't sleep for 2 years after this was done.
One last question. I'm Catholic. I appreciate what you've done on the Hallow app. You don't just show up at a premiere and thank God. You actually live your faith, it appears, from my perspective. Actors, sometimes people in the arts, they pay a penalty for living their faith. Was that a hard decision to make in your career, knowing that it was going to be a harder path?
Well, it wasn't a hard path to do in the Count of Monte Cristo. It wasn't a hard path. It was hard to turn down Mel Gibson on The Passion. His previous film was Braveheart. He told me what he was going to do, and that was like going up Mount Everest. And so...
And Paul the Apostle, by the way.
Yeah.
Great.
What's your purpose? It was my purpose.
Yeah.
So what's your purpose? Is evil going to hate it? 100%. But you got to print the truth. I got to make what the truth is, and I can only answer to when this is all done. I'm going to stand alone before God, and hopefully it won't be a judgment; it'll just be a hug.
So it's more important to be judged.
I love him. I love him. I love Jesus, and I love him. And I know people say God now, because they don't want to say Jesus, but I'll take his name say his name any day, because he's God to me. And I know, and I'm proud of the Blessed Mother. I love her. I love the angels and saints in heaven. So this guy, he's a Mormon.
Yeah.
And but he was so brave in what he did, it cost him his life. And he's showing a Catholic. And I can't have that.
Right. We gotta win.
But I gotta get in the
So what you're saying is it's more important to be judged properly by Jesus than it is to be judged by Jeffrey Katzenberg. Thanks, Jim. Great meeting you. I appreciate it. Yeah, I hope you heard the very end there. More important, when all is said and done, to be judged by Jesus Christ than it is to be judged by Jeffrey Katzenberg. Jim Caviezel, an incredibly courageous man who wears his heart on his sleeve, wears his faith on his sleeve. It's his passion, if I may use that word in this context, and his drive and his commitment that has made Sound of Freedom the phenomenon that it is today. And did you hear that moment in the interview? And again, thank you for bearing with us on the lack of video there that we lost. Did you hear in the video where he just said over and over again, I love him, I love Jesus, I love Jesus, I love him. And a lot of times when Hollywood stars win an award, they hold up their trophy and they thank God, but that's about the beginning, middle, and end of it. With Jim Caviezel, it goes much deeper than that. If your favorite actor in Hollywood isn't the same, maybe you should rethink your choices. There's more to come on O'Connor Tonight. Yesterday, the president of Israel, Isaac Herzog, was in Washington, D.C., and he met with President Joe Biden, and there was a moment in the Oval Office that was somewhat disconcerting. Take a look.
And we brought Israelis and Palestinians together at a political level, and Akra and Paul Schramm And as I
That's some stirring leadership right there. I don't know if he fell asleep. You know, it's so cute when they talk in their sleep, isn't it? I think he was reading notes off of his laptop. Either way, it doesn't stir the imagination with robust leadership on this ultra important cooperative relationship we have between Israel and the United States of America. By the way, President Herzog also addressed a session of Congress earlier today, and some members of President Biden's party boycotted it, calling Israel an apartheid state. So things are going great. Joining us right now is the founder and editor-in-chief of the Foreign Desk. She is Lisa Daftari. Lisa, thank you for joining us.
Of course, thank you for having me.
It's so sad to me that it all depends on the latest presidential election to tell us where things stand with our relationship with Israel, because after all of these years, we should always have a great relationship with this country. Where do things stand right now under the Biden administration?
You know, it's absolutely true. This flip-flopping that happens in the White House, the foreign policies have been entirely shifting. And this is as of President Obama's presidency. Before that, we used to see, more bipartisan leadership regarding things like Israel, terrorism, national security, right? Things that really are just logical and make perfect sense. So I will start with the more optimistic view that, look, regardless of who's in the White House, that fundamental core relationship with the state of Israel, between the United States and Israel, will always be there. Now, does it matter that on the surface, presidents like Obama and President Biden have created some distance between themselves, and particularly with someone like Bibi Netanyahu? Absolutely, it matters. And we can see that based on the amount of anti-Semitism and Jew hatred that we're seeing throughout the world, and particularly in the United States. It's a direct reflection of so many things. What's going on in our universities, what's going on with these hateful ladies in Congress, what's going on with Biden calling out Bibi Netanyahu, et cetera. So it absolutely matters. It absolutely affects our relationship with Israel. And President Biden and his administration should know that the optics really do matter.
And it's not just President Biden, it's his entire party. You mentioned these ladies in Congress. You mean the squad, of course. One member of the squad, Congresswoman Jayapal from Washington, she said at the Netroots conference over the weekend that Israel is a racist state. Then she amended her remarks. She said, oh, I don't think the idea of Israel is racist. I don't quite get the distinction there. But then her cohort, Rashida Tlaib, she boycotted the speech in Congress, and she held up a big sign that said, ban apartheid, obviously calling Israel an apartheid state. This is outrageous, Lisa.
These women need to be schooled first and foremost. You see it all over social media, but you don't expect people who are actually elected into office in the United States to be saying these untruthful narratives and spreading them as if they are truths. First of all, nobody cares that they didn't show up. Nobody missed their absence, nothing like that. But the fact that they do put this on social media and they do try to propagate these narratives, they are trying to paint Israel as a white-only apartheid state. Arabs live in Israel. The happiest of Palestinians live in Israel.
Yeah.
The ones that live in the Palestinian territories actually wish they lived inside Israel so they could have the same rights and freedoms that Arabs living in Israel have. That's first of all. Second of all, there are plenty of Black, Ethiopian, brown Jews. This is not a white state that is causing any sort of apartheid. It is the only democracy in the Middle East. They actually have a gay pride parade. I mean, look this stuff up before you spew garbage.
Yeah.
And lastly, if they're elected officials in the United States, they should represent and love the United States. If you love the Palestinians so much, go become a Palestinian representative.
I got to ask you, Lisa, when you put it that way, I mean, it seems obvious on the face of it, but would you rather be a Persian or Arab Muslim living in Israel under their government, or would you rather be a Jew living in any of the other Middle Eastern nations? And it's pretty obvious the answer.
You have to, exactly. And I have done so many interviews. You could look this up. In 2014, exactly, I remember it was Operation Protective Edge. And I interviewed so many Gazans. I mean, they were under direct fire. And they blamed Hamas for mismanagement, for putting them in harm's way, for putting them in places where their children were getting hurt by missiles, and they were not blaming Israel. If you speak to individuals and not just look at whether it's the left media in this country or the left media in Israel or these hateful, hateful ladies who should not be elected into Congress or hold any office for that matter. I wouldn't even elect them into our library board here locally because they are not fair, they are not factual, and they're filled with hate. I mean,
also, Lisa Daftari, that all of this is going on at the same time that the Biden administration continues to demean our nation, grovel to the mullahs in Iran. They're jumping through. They're doing whatever they can to restore this relationship with this evil government in Iran and try to allow them to continue down the path of developing nuclear weapons. What is the latest now on the Biden administration's overtures to Iran?
You know, this will go down in history. And I say that because yesterday I wrote an op-ed for Newsweek saying that President Carter owes the Iranian people an apology because of his involvement in helping to topple the Shah and bring in the Khomeini mullah's regime. And now we're seeing President Biden do the same. Now, his administration said earlier on, when they took a step back from the nuclear negotiating table, that they do not involve themselves in regime change policies. Fine, but now they are helping the regime, and that's what the Iranians inside Iran say. If you're not going to help us, don't stand in the way. So what the Biden administration is hoping to do is get a nuclear deal before their term is over. Remove that will include removing the sanctions, letting them off the hook, allowing this bad behavior, whether it's human rights abuses, whether it's putting money into global terrorism and regional terrorism, and of course continuing on with their weapons program. We've never seen any good behavior by giving them all this money and normalizing relations with them. We've never gotten anything in exchange. It looks like this is what the Biden administration's ideology is. This is what they want to do. They want to normalize relations with this mullah's regime before leaving office. And the people of Iran are noticing. And again, this will go down in history.
Yeah, so you've got the Biden administration basically cozying up to the Iranian government and helping them, it appears, to their end goal of acquiring a nuclear weapon. You've got Joe Biden nearly falling asleep and mumbling his way through this appearance in the Oval Office with President Herzog. You've got congresswomen calling Israel an apartheid state, calling Israel a racist state, boycotting the address by the president to Congress. How does this all affect the actual people in Israel, the boots on the ground, the actual Israelis who we've always been able to rely on, who really are like our brothers and sisters there in the Middle East?
You know, it's funny, you touched upon two countries that absolutely love the United States, and that is the people of Israel. They love the United States. They are probably our biggest fans in the Middle East, and also the people of Iran that are looking towards the United States in a very loving way. I mean, what you hear about the propaganda of the regime of saying there's big Satan and little Satan, actually another important angle here is actually the relationship between the people of Iran and the people of Israel that have grown much closer in the past year. Ever since the Masa Amini protests inside Iran, they've gotten a lot of support from the people of Israel. They have taken note, and they know that they have more in common than not. So hopefully there will be something like a Cyrus Accords in the future and bring the people together and remove these horrible dictators from Iran's regime.
I love that positive outlook, and I really do yearn for a day where the people of Iran can be free of this totalitarian regime. Yeah. And we can actually cooperate again. That would be a beautiful, I can't imagine seeing it in my lifetime, but at the same time, when you look at the Abraham Accords under President Trump and the peace that we now see between Israel and countries that had been mortal enemies just decades before, I guess anything can happen. It just takes leadership.
It takes leadership, and the time is right. The people of Iran are ready. The region is ready. All they need is a little bit of support and some organization, and hopefully we'll see it happen soon.
Imagine if the energy from this administration that they've put toward normalizing this evil government, if they had actually put that energy toward reaching out and helping the Iranian people and helping give voice to the protests that we've seen the last couple of years.
Or at least put pressure on the regime so that the people can get it done themselves. This will be a grassroots movement. This absolutely will be a grassroots movement, but they do need our support.
And it puts into focus the very important national security and foreign policy implications of this upcoming presidential election. That's why we read the Foreign Desk and Lisa Daftari's very good views there. Thank you, Lisa. Great stuff as always. There's more to come. Keep it here. It's O'Connor Tonight. All right, listen, I'm going to admit this right at the beginning here. I'm not a big country music fan. You know, I like classic rock, maybe some show tunes. I mean, I used to work on Broadway. I like musicals, so sue me. That said, there's a country music song right now that is absolutely dominating the American political conversation and the cultural conversation. It's by Jason Aldean, and here's a little bit of it.
Sidewalk, carjacking old lady at a red light, pull a gun on the owner of a liquor store. You think it's cool, act a fool if you like. Cuss out a cop, spit in his face, stomp on the flag and light it up. Yeah, you think you're tough. Well, try that in a small town.
There you go. Try that in a small town. Obviously, the imagery there shows the protests of the last couple of years, led by Antifa, Black Lives Matter's destruction of American cities. And he says, try that in a small town. And that message is resonating with a lot of Americans who like his music and very much like the message. So, of course, CMT, the country music television station, has banned the song from the airways. Joining us right now to discuss that is Greg Price, who's been following this story. And first of all, clearly you're a Jason Aldean fan. You like this song.
Yeah, it's a great song, and I'm not convinced that the people who are angry about it are living in the same reality as the rest of us. They're saying that what he's singing about is racist and pro-lynching. It's like, what part was racist about it? The part where crimes are bad, that carjacking old ladies at red lights, you know, are things people shouldn't do and wouldn't fly in areas that actually respect law and order. In order to actually make the argument that that is racist, you have to imply that it's black people who do those things, which would make you yourself the racist. So it's completely ridiculous. He then in the second verse sings about how, you know, politicians out there want to take away people's guns and criminalize self-defense. I mean, yeah, that's obviously true, and they're very mad about that as well. And so, like, the backlash is totally insane. CMT, you know, caving to the woke mob is even crazier. And, like, you know, Larry, clearly we have way too many conservatives in the music industry, prominent people who espouse conservative views, that, you know, we have too many of those, and they need to go away.
Exactly.
It's a real systemic problem.
It really is a problem really there. You know, we conservatives are dominating all the Hollywood movies, TV shows, the music industry. We've had our way for too long, Greg. It's about time they drew the line somewhere.
And that's, at the end of the day, why they're so mad. It's not that anything they're saying is true. It's not. They're mad that Jason Aldean would be a person of prominence in the music industry that would dare call out the political left on their bullshit, would dare speak up against the riots that occurred in this country in the summer of 2020 that the left likes to pretend wouldn't exist, call them out for their anti-Second Amendment agenda.
That's right. That's
the real reason they're angry. And in order to be outraged about this, they have to just, at the end of the day, completely lie about everything Jason Aldean said.
It's an incredibly important point you make there, Greg, because, you know, as we saw our cities burning, as we saw this atrocious behavior, by the way, let's not forget, it was at the same time we were told to get locked down in our house. We couldn't go to work and we couldn't send our kids to school, but you can go out and protest and burn your city down, and that's lionized and celebrated. There was not one voice in our popular culture that would actually speak out and say, oh no, this is wrong. So now you've got that voice. Here's the problem, though, and I think a lot of people are concerned about this. You would think that CMT would be a safe space here for this kind of message. What's going on over at the cable network that they bowed to a couple of voices on social media and actually removed this song from the playlist?
Well, CMT has gone woke. They've been going woke for a pretty long time. You know, at their last awards ceremony, they had, I think it was Kelsey Ballerini, bring out a drag show on stage, and they didn't even have any of the most prominent members or figures in country music attending. And so they've gone woke in the same way that the rest of, you know, the corporate side of the music industry and other genres have gone woke. And that's exactly why they've now taken this off, because, you know, they don't respond to what their customers want. And, you know, the people who listen to Jason Aldean and the people who listen to country music at large are overwhelmingly conservative and agree with the song. You know, the corporate side of the music industry responds to whatever trends are happening on social media.
Yeah.
And whatever meets the interest of the corporation. It's not about what the customers want. We're seeing an extension of that here.
Well, if anybody's wondering whether Mr. Aldean might bow under pressure from the record labels, from CMT, from the corporate part of the music world, take a look at his wife's Instagram, Brittany Aldean, a lovely woman. She posted this picture of the two of them with the message. You can see it says, "Never apologize for speaking the truth. Love us." That tells you that they're apologize for what, as Andrew Breitbart would say.
Yeah, absolutely. He didn't back down at all. He obviously had that tweet that he tweeted as well, defending the song and calling out the people lying about him. Jason Aldean has never shied away from his political views. He's posted videos of himself golfing with Donald Trump. He's never been afraid to be an outspoken conservative and a person of prominence in American culture, and has been for decades at this point. And good for him for doing that. We need a little bit more courage. People of like kind of the cultural elite of the art institutions in this country have a little more courage to speak up for what's right. Yeah. And props to Jason Aldean for doing that. Now, I'll be seeing him next Thursday when he comes to town. Is
this your really sleazy way of getting some sort of invite for a backstage pass or something? Are you?
I don't know if he watches. I don't know if he watches your show, Larry. But if he does, that would be awesome. I'll take him up on it.
Absolutely shameless. Well, listen. When I was your age, Greg, and the record labels or the radio stations or MTV or something, when they decided they weren't going to play a song, that would kill that artist's chances. But now, in the world we're living in, the digital age where people can just go direct to the artist and buy the music that they want and listen to the music they want, it's a very different world. And take a look at the charts right now. I believe this is from Apple Music. #1 song, Try That in a Small Town. And I don't think it was #1, Greg, before this controversy. So in a way, CMT is helping Jason with this song.
Yeah, it's the Barbra Streisand effect working full order right here. And what's funny is the song came out in May. It's been out for 2 months already.
Really?
And yet it just became a controversy over the weekend. And yeah, now it's gone to #1. And we see this all the time. They tried to cancel Morgan Wallen too after his neighbor filmed him saying a racial slur while he was drunk that he apologized for. And his album that he had just released before that incident happened went on to become the best-selling album in all of 2021. Like, this happens all the time when people are canceled. That's where all the eyeballs end up going. Yep. And since, as you said, in the age of where music is dominated by streaming and where social media plays a huge role in whether songs go viral or not, the people who do the canceling really don't have as much power as they think they do.
That's right.
And that's exactly what that's exactly what we see. Like,
no more gatekeepers.
Song going to #1.
No more gatekeepers. That's why we do streaming news here on Salem News Channel, so people can go direct to us rather than having to worry about the gatekeepers in big media. Greg, great stuff. By the way, our mutual friend and my colleague here at Town Hall, Kevin McMahon, says that you're absolutely right about this, except for one thing: he doesn't think it's a very good song.
Yeah, well, Kevin. I don't think Kevin's taste in music is more fine-tuned as mine is. That's what I would respond to that.
Fine-tuned. All right, good to know. I just did that because he helps videos at Town Hall go viral, so maybe he'll grab that and just send it on its way. Thanks, Greg. Great stuff. There's more to come on O'Connor Tonight. Looks like Larry Hogan is running for president as a third-party candidate, and I'm all for it. Because if Larry Hogan or maybe Joe Manchin runs on one of these no-labels third party, we're better than the Republicans and Democrats, we're altruistic, we're pure, we're wonderful. If one of those guys runs on one of those tickets, boom, we've got a Republican president. I don't care who the nominee is. We win. This hurts Joe Biden more than anybody else. I'll explain that in a moment, but let me remind you who Larry Hogan is, if you've forgotten. He was the governor of Maryland for 8 years, 2 consecutive terms. First Republican to do that in about, 50, 60 years. By the way, I live in Maryland. He was my governor. I voted for him. I'm glad I did. He wasn't the best Republican, but he was better than what the Democrats were offering, so I liked that about him. But see, here's the problem with Larry Hogan. He didn't do much to actually build the Republican Party in the state of Maryland. He really focused on what was best for Larry Hogan. And when it came time to replace Larry Hogan with a new election, he endorsed one Republican candidate, and that Republican candidate lost to a more Trump-friendly Republican in the state of Maryland. And at that point, Larry Hogan was out of here. He didn't care. He didn't help that Republican win the election. He basically helped the Democrat, Wes Moore, win the election. In fact, on the day of the primary, when his candidate was trying to get that nomination in Maryland, where was Larry Hogan campaigning for his gal? He was in New Hampshire. So we all thought, okay, he's running for president, but then he decided he wasn't going to run for president. Then we thought maybe he was going to run for Senate. There's an open seat now. Ben Cardin in Maryland, he's retiring. And, well, he's not running for Senate either. So Larry Hogan has retired for all intents and purposes. And then yesterday, he released this video.
We had leaders from all across the country flying in today.
So Wednesday, Governor Larry Hogan held the governor's celebration.
Governor Hogan was at an event in Hanover, Maryland last night to celebrate his 8 years as governor. Governor Hogan is well regarded among Republicans, Democrats, and independents, and because of that, he stood out.
But I've always been an underdog, and people have always counted us out. But every single time, we've beaten the odds. And the people in this room have already helped us achieve the impossible. And if we can do that here in Maryland, then there's no place in America where these very same principles would not succeed.
That guy's running for something, all right. And it ain't governor, it ain't senator, so it's got to be president, but not the Republican nomination. How do we know? Well, because yesterday the Washington Post had an article about this emerging no labels ticket. They want to offer a third-party alternative to Biden and, well, the presumptive nominee for the Republicans, Donald Trump. And they floated two names, Larry Hogan and Joe Manchin, the Democrat from West Virginia. And here's what Larry Hogan did on Twitter. Take a look. He took a quote from that very same article saying, one would be former Maryland Governor Larry Hogan, who's worked with the group and spent much of his 8 years running a blue state with sterling approval numbers. In his final months, he had a popularity. He was pointing out the fact that the Washington Post is saying that Larry Hogan would be a great candidate on the no labels third party ticket in 2024. And to that we say, bravo, Governor Hogan. Do it. Do it. Please run, because let's face it, there is not one single Republican who is ready to vote for either Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis or whoever ends up being the nominee. There's not one of them who's sitting there thinking, if only I can vote for Larry Hogan. You know what? Every single Republican who would really rather vote for Larry Hogan today is already voting for Joe Biden. And there are also a lot of Democrats who are currently planning on voting for Joe Biden because they can't bring themselves to vote for a Republican. And if Larry Hogan runs, he'll get some of those votes too. If Larry Hogan runs, he will only help the Republican nominee. Or if Joe Manchin ends up being the no labels third party candidate, he will also help Donald Trump or whoever the Republican nominee is. Those votes will come from Joe Biden. Don't believe me? Look at history. 1980, Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan. People knew that Jimmy Carter was a disaster. And if they were going to vote for him, a lot of them were only voting for him because they were terrified of Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan's a psychopath. He's inexperienced. He's only an actor. He's going to bring us to the brink of nuclear war. So they voted for John Anderson. It made him feel great. It made me feel great too, because Ronald Reagan became president. And by the way, on the flip side, in 1992, the same thing happened in reverse when Ross Perot ran. A cut spending, cut taxes, protect the border, no trade with Mexico guy from Texas who graduated from the Naval Academy. You think he drew votes from Bill Clinton? Of course not. He drew votes from the Republican from Texas, George Bush. Larry Hogan, run, baby, run. That's it for tonight. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. In the meantime, I'll see you on the radio.